The blade that ends your reign, that never approaches from the front. If it did, you would see the gleam of the steel. You would catch the hand. You would block the strike. You would fight back with the absolute ferocity of a cornered wolf. The front is where your declared enemies stand. The front is where the honest war happens. But you were not standing on a battlefield. You were sitting at a dinner table. You were laughing, passing the wine, lowering your heavy armor piece by piece. You were sharing your grandest dreams, your deepest fears, and your most fatal weaknesses with someone you called a brother, someone you called a partner. And that is precisely why you are currently bleeding out on the floor. The betrayal that utterly dismantles a man never arrives wearing the face of a stranger. A stranger is entirely powerless against you, because a stranger has not been granted the detailed geography of your blind spots. They have absolutely no access to your back. The fatal blow always, without exception, comes from the hand you explicitly entrusted with the key to your own gates. Looking back at the smoking wreckage of your trust, you feel entirely foolish. You feel blind, as if you were walking through a burning building with your eyes sewn shut. You obsessively replay the memories, the quiet dinners, the late-night conversations, and suddenly, the red flags you desperately painted white begin to bleed through the canvas. You finally see the lingering glances of envy. You hear the calculated pauses before their congratulations. You realize, with a sickening clarity, that the signs of your impending execution were there all along. They were screaming at you in a language you stubbornly refused to learn. Why? Because you are infected with a lethal psychological disease called hope. You desperately want to believe that human beings are inherently good. You want to believe that loyalty is the default, hardwired setting of the human soul, rather than a rare and fragile anomaly. Niccolò Machiavelli, the grand architect of power, would look at your bleeding back and laugh. 500 years ago, in the cutthroat, blood-soaked courts of Florence, Machiavelli did not waste his time writing poetry about how the world ought to be. He was not a moralist preaching to a congregation of sheep. He was a cold surgeon, dissecting the dark, rotting anatomy of human nature. He wrote the brutal code that governs how things actually are, and his final verdict was freezing cold. Men, he observed, are universally ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, and driven entirely by their own covetous self-interest. If you operate your life on the naive assumption that people are loyal until they prove otherwise, you are not a strategist. You are a gambler, walking blindly through a psychological minefield. You are practically begging the universe to destroy you. But if you choose to wake up, if you learn to decode the subtle, dark mechanics of the human shadow, if you study the quiet architecture of deception, you mutate into something else entirely. You stop being the eternal victim of a tragic betrayal, and you ascend to become a master of human dynamics. You develop the predator's gaze. You can spot the traitor in your ranks weeks, months, even years before they even think to draw the blade. To achieve this absolute sovereignty, you must first understand the fatal flaw in your own operating system. In the study of dark psychology, this vulnerability is known as the projection of virtue. You consider yourself a man of honor. You value the weight of your given word. If you swear an oath to help, you will sacrifice your own blood to help. And because you operate with this rigid code of ethics, you naturally project this same value system onto the predators circling your camp. You assume, disastrously, that because you would never betray them, they will naturally never betray you. This is not just a mistake. This is a fatal error in grand strategy. As Machiavelli so clearly warned, a man who wishes to make a profession of goodness in everything must necessarily come to grief among so many who are not good. You are standing in the dark forest, projecting your own noble reflection onto a starving wolf. The wolf does not care about your honorable reflection. The wolf does not care about your shared history. The wolf only cares about the hunger in its stomach. Most individuals in this world view trust as a warm emotion. They say, "I feel like I can trust him." They rely on the deceptive comfort of the interaction. This is a delusion of the weak. Trust, true trust, is never a feeling. Trust is a cold, mathematical calculation. The exact moment you begin to rely on vibes, charm, or interpersonal chemistry, you have officially become prey. The greatest architects of deception in human history, from the seducers of old courts to the financial conquerors of the modern era, were absolute masters of the vibe. They manufactured an artificial aura that made you feel singularly special. They made you feel profoundly understood. They weaponized your deep, unspoken desire for human connection, using it as a psychological Trojan horse to quietly bypass your emotional walls. You must immediately execute the habit of trusting your fragile feelings. You must start trusting the cold, hard architecture of patterns. Words are just wind. They lie constantly. Emotions are shifting tides, and they deceive you. But behavior, consistent, undeniable behavior, is the only absolute truth in the universe. We are now going to dissect 3 specific behavioral patterns. 3 subtle tells that signal a dormant enemy sleeping under your own roof. These are the individuals currently in your inner circle, masquerading as your most devoted allies. We are going to rip the masks off. Gemini Danoi. Traitor sign number 1. The weaponized vulnerability, the premature confessor. This is the absolute ultimate trap for the highly intelligent mind, and precisely why it effortlessly catches the smartest strategists completely off guard. Society aggressively conditions us to believe that emotional vulnerability is the ultimate, undeniable sign of closeness. We are indoctrinated with the dangerous, fairy tale myth that if someone drops their darkest secrets and profound traumas at our feet, it means they have completely surrendered to us. So, you encounter a new face in your realm, a new business colleague, a potential romantic partner, a fresh acquaintance, and within a mere fraction of a week, or perhaps even the first few hours, they dump something incredibly heavy onto your lap. They whisper graphic details about their abusive past. They unveil the supposed insanity of an ex who ruined their empire. They hand you a deep, dark secret, one they solemnly swear they have never uttered to a single living soul. Your ego instantly inflates. You silently think to yourself, they must recognize my superior character. We must share a profound, incredibly rare cosmic connection. You are absolutely deluding yourself. You are not special. You are merely the designated target. This is not the beautiful, organic blooming of intimacy. This is a calculated, premature confession, and in the unforgiving, cutthroat arena of dark psychology, this is nothing more than a highly aggressive transaction. Machiavelli perfectly understood the complex levers of the human machine. He knew men are primarily driven by 2 impulses, love and fear. But there is a third, much more insidious psychological driver, debt. When this individual hands you a bleeding piece of their own history, they instantly forge a heavy, subconscious chain of emotional debt around your neck. They have given you a piece of their vulnerability. Now, the unwritten, primitive social contract of human reciprocity brutally demands that you offer up a piece of your own armor in return. So, what do you inevitably do? You lower your shield. You surrender your own guarded secrets. You confess your hidden insecurities, the quiet friction in your home, or the shadow of your unfiled taxes. You genuinely believe you are cementing a lifelong alliance. The freezing truth is, you are hand-delivering high-caliber ammunition to a sniper. The premature confessor is almost always a creature completely devoid of psychological boundaries, and a creature without boundaries is fundamentally incapable of genuine loyalty. If they are willing to carelessly auction off their own private suffering to a complete stranger like you, they will absolutely sell your deepest, darkest fears to the very next stranger they encounter. Pause and calculate the geometry of their actions. Why on earth would they trust you so aggressively? They know absolutely nothing of your actual character. They do not know if you are a tyrant or a saint. They do it because it is a ruthless manipulation tactic. It is a psychological speed run. They want to completely bypass the agonizingly slow, necessary years required to build actual, tested loyalty by directly hacking your biological empathy. Real trust is agonizingly slow. True trust is carved out of solid rock over decades. The Roman legions knew this. The Spartan phalanxes knew this. You did not earn a coveted place in the inner circle by sharing a sad story around a campfire. You earned it by bleeding on the exact same muddy battlefield for 10 brutal years. Beware the individual who desperately tries to fast forward the timeline of a relationship. If someone unveils their darkest trauma on the very first interaction, turn your back and walk away without a single word. They are not seeking a partner, they are hunting for a hostage. They are desperately seeking a mule to carry their psychological baggage. And the absolute second you attempt to erect a healthy boundary, the moment you try to take one step back, they will violently weaponize that exact vulnerability against you. They will cry out, "I gave you my soul. I trusted you when I was broken. How can you be so utterly cold? You are now trapped. You stay because you feel a suffocating guilt. And that precise guilt is the iron cage they carefully constructed for you within the very first hour of your meeting." Machiavelli would advise you to take the information, but give absolutely nothing in return. Keep your own cards face down in the dark. A secret shared far too soon is never a gift. It is a razor-sharp hook. Do not bite. Traitor sign number 2. The Switzerland syndrome. The pathological neutral. Listen closely to their favorite, meticulously rehearsed script. "I do not want to get involved. I am just going to stay entirely out of it. I can see both sides of the board." To the untrained, naive ear, these carefully chosen sentences sound incredibly mature. They sound reasonable. They sound like the measured, enlightened words of a wise peacemaker. Do not be fooled. They are the precise words of a traitor preparing to let you die. In the timeless, blood-stained pages of The Prince, Machiavelli dedicates an entire doctrine to the absolute fatal nature of neutrality. He coldly argues that when two neighboring powers engage in a vicious conflict, the ruler, who attempts to remain perfectly neutral, is universally hated by the loser and utterly despised by the victor. Why? Because choosing neutrality is never, ever a moral stance. Neutrality is a pathetic, desperate, and highly calculated safety measure. When a person in your circle remains perfectly neutral while someone openly disrespects you, they are not demonstrating intellectual objectivity. They are strategically hedging their bets against your potential downfall. Let us examine the battlefield. You are engaged in a vicious conflict. Someone has actively stolen from you, fabricated malicious lies about your name, or disrespected you in the public square. Your so-called friend watches this entire execution unfold. They possess the complete, undeniable knowledge that you are right. They know perfectly well that the other party is a venomous snake, but when you turn to them for the absolute basic support of an ally, they merely shrug their shoulders. They whisper, "I am friends with both of you. I do not want to choose a side." Engrave this brutal truth into your mind. Silence is never passive. Silence is a highly aggressive, deliberate choice. By fundamentally refusing to openly condemn the disrespect leveled against you, they are actively validating and endorsing that exact disrespect. The pathological neutral values their cheap, frictionless social access to the masses far more than they value any rigid set of internal principles. They harbor a desperate, sickening desire to be universally liked. They want to keep every single escape route propped open. A man who desperately wants to be liked by everyone absolutely stands for nothing. If they refuse to draw their sword to defend you when you are undeniably right, they will never defend you when you are wounded and vulnerable. These individuals are the most incredibly dangerous types of enemies because they are entirely invisible. They do not have the courage to step up and attack you from the front. They simply step slightly to the side and quietly allow the incoming chariot to crush your bones. And then they have the absolute audacity to show up at your hospital bed with cheap flowers, whispering how incredibly sorry they are that the tragedy occurred. They are always the very first to raise a glass when you conquer the city, and the very first to vanish into the fog when the siege begins. Machiavelli held far more respect for a roaring open enemy than a smiling neutral friend. An open enemy declares their position. They draw a line in the sand. You know their exact coordinates. You can calculate their strike. The neutral friend forces you to build your entire fortress on shifting sand. You construct your heavy walls upon their supposed loyalty. And the very moment the violent storm actually arrives, the foundation violently liquefies beneath your feet. Look closely at your circle right now. Who are the pathetic individuals who constantly play the devil's advocate the exact moment someone drives a knife into your back? Who are the people who softly whisper, "Well, maybe he did not mean it exactly like that," when the attacker clearly meant it exactly like that? They are not trying to offer you a profound, elevated perspective. They are desperately trying to avoid the heavy, brutal discomfort of actual loyalty. Loyalty is extraordinarily uncomfortable. Loyalty carries a massive tax. Loyalty absolutely requires making dangerous enemies. If your supposed friend is absolutely terrified of making enemies, they are not your friend. They are merely a fan sitting in the audience. And fans are notoriously fickle. Dante Alighieri, a fellow Florentine who intimately understood the dark depths of the soul, reserved the absolute hottest, most agonizing circle of hell, not for the murderers or the violently wicked, but for those who, in times of critical moral crisis, preserved their sickening neutrality. Why? Because the violent man at least possesses the fiery courage of his dark convictions. The neutral man possesses absolutely nothing but a pathetic, animal instinct for self-preservation. Do not ever trust the individual who comfortably shares a table with your declared enemies. It is a mathematical impossibility. If they are comfortably drinking wine with the exact person actively attempting to poison your well, they are the ones handing them the cup. Cut the rope immediately. Let them float forever in the empty void of their precious neutrality. You require hardened allies who are absolutely willing to bleed out beside you, not passive spectators eating bread while you fight for your very survival. Traitor sign number 3. The grandstander of virtue, the moral performer. Listen closely to their endless, exhausting broadcasts. I absolutely despise drama. I am a deep empath. I am simply too honest for this dark world. I am just a genuinely nice person, and that is my tragic downfall. The absolute loudest, most desperate announcements in any given room are universally the biggest, most meticulously crafted lies. In the clinical, cold study of human psychology, this phenomenon is precisely identified as reaction formation. It is a pathetic, yet highly effective defense mechanism. It occurs when a fractured mind obsessively, aggressively portrays the exact opposite of its true nature. Why? Because they are absolutely terrified of the dark, twisted reality of their own reflection. The individual who constantly, unprovoked, declares their profound hatred for drama is always the secret architect of the chaos. They are the arsonist, complaining loudly about the smoke while holding the matches behind their back. The person who constantly reminds you of their unshakable honesty is quietly calculating the exact angle to deceive you. Machiavelli dedicated entire volumes to the lethal weaponization of virtue. He coldly instructed the princes of his era that it is absolutely never necessary to actually possess compassion, mercy, or unwavering integrity. Possessing them is a heavy burden. Possessing them is a weakness. But it is absolutely critical, a matter of life and death, to flawlessly appear to possess them. The masses only ever perceive the carefully painted mask you choose to wear. Very few, almost no one, ever experiences the cold, calculating predator breathing underneath the porcelain. But here is the terrifying twist of our modern era. The modern manipulator has diligently studied the exact same playbook. They comprehend that to successfully camouflage their dangerous dark triad traits, their towering narcissism, their ruthless psychopathy, their own corrupted Machiavellianism, they must stitch together the flawless skin of a weeping saint. They do not merely act like a good person. They aggressively perform goodness like a desperate actor on a burning stage. They broadcast their supposed moral superiority 20 times a day. They ensure you see their charity. They appoint themselves the ultimate, unquestionable moral judge of your inner circle. This is nothing but high-level optical camouflage. A man of actual, unbreakable integrity never feels the pathetic need to advertise his honor. Genuine goodness is completely silent. True integrity is a quiet, heavy stone. It is demonstrated exclusively in the brutal arena of action, never in loud, desperate press releases. When someone is constantly broadcasting their morality, they are actively selling you an illusion. And if they are selling, you must immediately check your pockets. This specific archetype is the most extraordinarily dangerous of the three, because they expertly weaponize morality against your own mind. If you ever catch them in a lie, they will instantly violently flip the script. They will look at you with manufactured tears and say, "How could you possibly accuse me? After every single sacrifice I have made for you." They use their fabricated virtue as an impenetrable, absolute shield. You feel paralyzed to attack them because society has labeled them untouchable. But you must force yourself to observe the microscopic disconnects. Watch the individual who speaks to you like an angel, but treats the servant like absolute dirt. Watch the friend who preaches absolute loyalty, but aggressively slaughters the reputation of their other best friend the exact second they leave the room. The mask always, inevitably, slips for a fraction of a second. Machiavelli explicitly warned that the starving wolf does not politely knock on the door and announce his hunger. He bleats, he grazes, he patiently waits until the naive shepherd finally closes his heavy eyes. As you listen to these words, specific faces are rapidly flashing through your mind. You feel a sudden, cold tightness gripping your chest. That is your primal, biological intuition finally waking up from the heavy sedatives you have been forcefully feeding it for years. But the agonizing question remains. Why did you refuse to see it before the blade entered your ribs? Why do we repeatedly, foolishly, trust these predators until they leave our empires in ashes? It is a fatal psychological glitch known as normalcy bias. We naively assume that the current peace will stretch on into infinity. We assume that simply because the knife has not pierced our skin yet, it never will. We become hopelessly addicted to the comfortable status quo. To look your supposed best friend in the eye and acknowledge they are a pathological neutral demands a violent confrontation. It requires you to actively choose the cold, freezing isolation of the truth over the warm, comfortable lie. It means you must look into the mirror and finally admit you were completely, disastrously wrong. And the fragile human ego absolutely despises admitting it was fooled, even more than it despises the actual pain of betrayal. So, you spin elaborate, pathetic excuses for them. You violently gaslight your own instincts. You must stop this immediately. Survival in this brutal world absolutely requires the ruthless, unceremonious execution of your own illusions. Machiavelli did not pen his masterworks for the weak masses who desperately wanted to be comfortable. He wrote them exclusively for the apex predators who intended to survive the winter. You must now transition from passive observation to surgical, calculated action. Suspicion is merely a hypothesis. You require cold, undeniable, empirical proof. Machiavelli firmly believed in violently testing the structural integrity of a towering fortress long before risking a costly siege. You must now become the engineer of your own reality. You must violently test the structural integrity of every single bond you hold dear. We are about to apply localized psychological pressure points. When you apply absolute pressure, the weak materials instantly shatter, and it is infinitely better that they shatter right now, while the stakes are relatively low, than tomorrow, when you have your entire kingdom to lose. You now have your suspicions. You can clearly see the early signs. But a true scientist of power, a mind trained by Machiavelli, it never executes a loyal soldier based on a mere shadow. You must administer a violent stress test. Engineers do not assume a towering bridge is structurally sound. They ruthlessly drive the heaviest iron trucks over the concrete to see if it cracks under the sheer weight. You must now drive a heavy truck directly over your most precious relationships. Here are the 3 specific calculated methods to shatter the porcelain mask. Test 1. The absolute denial test for the premature confessor. The premature confessor utilizes their tragic vulnerability strictly to manufacture an inescapable emotional obligation. They desperately want you to merge your identity with their endless chaos. To successfully test them, you must drop a solid concrete wall precisely where they expect an open door. The very next time, they dramatically dump a heavy crisis on your shoulders or aggressively demand your precious time. Look them in the eye and say, no. Do not offer a pathetic, trembling apology. Do not construct a long, intricate paragraph of fragile excuses. Simply state, I do not have the absolute capacity to carry this for you right now. Now. Carefully observe the immediate micro-expressions flashing across their face. A healthy, rational ally will respect the heavy boundary. They will nod, adjust, and move forward. The parasitic manipulator will instantly panic. Their carefully constructed mask will violently crack in two. They will immediately attempt to weaponize guilt, screaming that they thought you were their true brother, crying that you are cold-heartedly abandoning them in the freezing snow. Or worse, they will turn to absolute ice and withdraw their presence to punish your independence. This specific, aggressive reaction is your undeniable proof. It empirically proves that their initial vulnerability was never a genuine plea for human connection. It was a calculated demand for your total submission. When you firmly refused to kneel, the hidden predator finally bared its teeth. If a single, two-letter word completely destroys the entire foundation of the relationship, it was never a relationship. It was a slow, agonizing psychological bleed. Test 2. The public defense protocol for the pathological neutral. The neutral desperately wants to exist in the comfortable, frictionless shadows where no blades can reach them. They want to effortlessly play both sides of the chessboard. So, violently drag them out into the blinding light of the sun. Manufacture a specific scenario where they are absolutely forced to take a definitive, public stance. It does not even need to be a massive, bloody war. It can be a simple, highly polarized decision or a controversial opinion. Look them directly in the eye and hold the suffocating silence. Force them to declare a side. Watch them physically squirm under the unbearable, crushing weight of accountability. Watch the cold sweat form on their brow. They will desperately attempt to deflect with cheap humor. They will try to play the wise philosopher. If they cannot summon the basic courage to support you in a trivial, meaningless debate, they will absolutely let you bleed out in the dirt when the real war arrives. If they anxiously scan the faces in the room to check the temperature of the crowd before they consult their own internal compass, they are a slave to the herd, and the herd will violently trample your lifeless body the exact second you trip on the stones. Test 3. The absolute withdrawal of praise for the moral performer. The grandstander operates entirely on a specific, highly combustible fuel, endless validation. They are starving for you to repeatedly declare them the absolute moral superior of the room. So, ruthlessly sever their supply lines. Completely starve the beast. Stop instantly liking their self-righteous digital broadcasts when they loudly recount their supposed charity work for the 10th time. Simply nod with an expression of absolute, crushing boredom. Treat their profound goodness as if it is entirely normal. Expected, completely unremarkable. Even the most towering narcissist absolutely despises being deeply boring. If you stop willingly feeding their bloated ego, they will inevitably escalate the performance. They will manufacture a massive, dramatic crisis to force your attention. Or they will begin the slow, subtle process of devaluing you. They will whisper tiny, venomous insults. They will try to provoke a negative reaction, because to a starved ego, negative attention is vastly superior to the freezing void of being ignored. By forcefully starving their bottomless vanity, you drag the real monster out of the dark cave. You will finally witness the simmering, dark rage hiding directly behind their angelic, patient smile. The brutal calculations are complete. The empirical results are resting in your hands. You are completely surrounded by smiling liabilities. This terrifying realization brings a suffocating weight to your chest. You might feel a sudden, violent urge to burn the entire camp to the ground, to scream at them, to publicly expose their dark triad machinery to the world. Stop. Breathe. Machiavelli explicitly warned against the pathetic indulgence of useless anger. He who truly desires to conquer the world must first completely command the violent impulses of his own mind. Do not create a desperate, theatrical scene. Do not announce your grand departure to the court. The emotional amateur loudly announces they are leaving the room. The undisputed master of the game simply fades into the fog. If you directly confront a seasoned manipulator, you merely hand them a final, golden opportunity to manipulate you one last time. They will cry. They will violently gaslight your memory. They will expertly spin the narrative to ensure you look like the paranoid madman to the rest of the village. Do not hand them the microphone. Use the slow, agonizing fade. Systematically withdraw your valuable energy. Become intensely busy. Become completely unreachable. The premature confessor will simply hunt for a new, naive ear to bleed into. The neutral will locate a new, stronger host to hide behind. Let them rot in their own endless cycles. Your absolute objective is not to fix broken people. Your objective is to brutally secure the perimeter of your own empire. You are building an absolute kingdom of the mind. You cannot afford to have foreign spies sleeping inside your heavy walls. A grand table of 12, where 6 men are quietly sharpening knives beneath the wood, is not a feast. It is a suicide mission. A quiet table of two, where absolute loyalty is written in blood, is the undisputed beginning of a dynasty. But before you lock the heavy iron gates, you must perform one final, excruciating test. The hardest entity to clearly see is the one staring back at you. Look directly into the black mirror. Are you the premature confessor, using your own tragic history to expertly trap the empathy of others? Are you the pathetic neutral, far too cowardly to draw a sword for the men who feed you? Are you the moral performer, acting like a saint because you are terrified of your own shadow? Clean the rot out of your own mind first, then seal the gates. The cold world does not reward the hopelessly naive. It brutally consumes them. The world does not reward the paralyzed, paranoid recluse. It simply forgets they exist. The world exclusively rewards the deeply perceptive. Be the solitary figure who sees the entire board. Trust nothing but absolute, undeniable proof. If this transmission violently woke you up, understand that this is merely the surface layer of the ice. There are dark psychological mechanics I absolutely cannot broadcast to the fragile masses. The system actively suppresses this level of raw, unfiltered power. If you are still listening to this exact frequency, you are an outlier. You belong here. Click the join button. Step into the inner sanctum of Machiavelli X and elevate your mind to the architect level. The masses will forever remain blind, and that is exactly the point.